Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Sword and Sandal Cinema, we have with us Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I started working out again, so I feel phenomenal.
Excellent.
And I'm looking forward to your tribute to Ed Fury. It's a shame that we lost him recently.
Oh, yeah, it is. It seems like almost every day when I, wake up, I'll check social media, and seemingly this year, it's just every morning there's somebody else, somebody else's whose career that I really liked, and unfortunately, we lost Ed Fury, Sword and Sandal cinema star, back in February at the age of 94. If you think about it, that's an incredibly long life.
Yes, it is.
For someone who was born in 1928, whose life expectancy for somebody born in 1928 was probably mid 70s for a male. So it's incredible that he lived that long. And if you look at more recent photos of him, which are kind of hard to find, you can find some from about 20 or so years ago. He was in his early 70s and looked 50. I mean, it just looked amazing. A very healthy specimen, very healthy person. I'm sure a lot of that's genetics. And let's face it, young pretty people make older pretty people. You know what I mean? Ugly ducklings don't transform into swans. That's just movie hokum.
I understand what you're saying, but I've never heard it expressed so eloquently.
Well, it is. I mean, not that you're jealous of anybody or anything, but haven't you ever looked at, let's say an actor on screen or somebody at the gym or something like that, and you think, gosh, this person hit the genetic jackpot. Got the fruit all the way across the slot machine. And I think Ed Fury was one of those people. I mean, he was very symmetrically built. A very handsome man, in addition to it. I guess anybody can, well, not anybody, but a lot of people can work out and maybe achieve the body, the physical aspect of it, but the face is. Hercules?
Yes, I'm here.
I heard somebody cough.
Yes, that was our audience.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry, I muted it.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I work in a building that is about 100 years old, and it's alleged to be haunted. I'm not in that building right now, but you never know when something's going to follow you home. So I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me hearing
Now, you recently put a link to, or you put the movie on your site, Wild Women of Wango. That was one of Ed Fury's films.
It was one of his earlier films. Now that's probably not fair to say that. It was, of all the Sword and Sandal actors, he was one of the few who had a career before and after the Peplum films craze, which is roughly between, let's say, 1958 1965. He was in Raw Edge. He had a pretty good role in Raw Edge, which is a decent Western with Rory Calhoun, and a couple of my favorites, Yvonne DiCarlo and Mara Corday, are in it. It's a good Universal Western. It also features John Gavin, who was a Universal contract player, Rex Reason, who was also under contract to Universal, and quality. Coming right at the end of the studio system, and that was probably something that held people like Ed Fury back. But he was in some TV. He had been in a lot of films that required kind of beefcake, muscular men, like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell. He'd been in Abbott and Costello Go to Mars as the King of Venus. So he was often hired for his looks, but he was hired very often. If you look at his filmography, it's very impressive. It extends all the way back into the early 1950s. And it's interesting to see his career transition over into peplum. And that's where we come into Wild Women of Wongo. One of my frequent visitors to my website, Jack Randall Earls, pointed out to me today, it's a shame that there wasn't more Ed in it. And that's true. I'm kind of surprised with his experience that this movie didn't really feature him as one of the main male players. I mean, he's got a supporting role, which isn't bad. But out of all the actors in it who were primarily local to the South Florida area, he's the one who's actually got the experience. It's kind of unusual to see that he's not a bigger player in the film. His next film, though, he does have a good role, which is Colossus and the Amazon Queen. That's with Rod Taylor, and I do too. What I like about it as well is that there are really good copies of it that are available for free because it's public domain, here in the U.S., as is Wild Women of Wongo, which is why I ran that. As I recall, that's about the only thing that I can find. Those are the only two films that I could find for Ed Fury that I definitively know are public domain. And I don't like to run stuff that's not, because that's a copyright violation.
Yes, of course.
You don't want to get into things like that. So.
Well, it's a big deal. I know several movie makers and film collectors who own rights to movies and
or claim to.
Yeah, and that brings up all sorts of issues, and you get into intellectual property law, and so yeah, I wouldn't do anything that isn't in the public domain. I wouldn't run with anything that isn't. With Wild Women of Wongo, I like that movie also because the weird language that the Wild Women of Wongo are talking, it's Greek. So it adds a whole new dimension to the movie when you can understand the quote unquote gibberish that they're speaking.
And that's terrible of me because I just assumed it was gibberish and never really listened to it.
But it's a scary reality to get a little bit away from motion pictures for a second. I used to work as a therapist in a psychiatric hospital and other settings. And one time in the psychiatric hospital, there was a woman who was, hospitalized. And I spoke with her, and then I asked the doctor, what was she doing here? And she goes, oh, she was speaking gibberish and she pulled a fire alarm. So I told him the gibberish she's speaking is Macedonian Greek. It's a dialect. It's difficult to understand, but it's Greek. So I was able to speak with her, and her understanding of what she was doing was her kids, as she was visiting from Greece, she told them she wanted to mail a letter. So they told her to go out and look for something that was, rectangular and had a handle, and to pull the handle and then to put the letter in the handle. And then, make sure it goes down. So that's what she had done. She saw a fire alarm and thought it was a mailbox. And because she was from another country, they don't have our type of mailboxes. So she pulled the handle, she put the letter in there. She was waiting for the letter to go down when the firemen and the police came. So because she was speaking gibberish, they hospitalized her in a psychiatric unit. So I was glad I was on hand to help unravel that, because can you imagine what was going through her mind, her family's minds, looking for her? She went down to mail a letter and disappeared. So knowing gibberish languages is good.
Well, after 35 years of grading college student prose, I no longer have any language skills at all. I can't spell anymore.
Maybe not, but you're very eloquent, though.
Well, I used to be. I used to be a good writer too. I don't know that that's the case anymore either. You get if you don't practice something every day, you get out of touch with it. That's one of the areas in which it's one of the things that really keeps me into working on the drive-in, is that that is sort of the only creative outlet I have, at the moment. And you have to express those urges too. You And
Right.
if you don't, you get rusty, kind of like anything else, like any other skill, like riding a bicycle. If you don't use it, you lose it after a while.
Yeah, I've mentioned this many times, and I'm going to keep mentioning it as long as we're interacting. That I think your website would make a wonderful, like, coffee table book. With seriously, 'cause
It would make a big one, that's for sure.
you make a big one, but you even if you just did one category at a time, like the many faces of Hercules, and
Mm.
made a coffee table book on that, that'd be hundreds of pages long, and it would have all these pictures in the public domain, and you could even spruce it up by adding more pictures than you have on the site. And I can't think of one sword and sandal movie fan that would pass up on having that.
You are right. A certain genre really lend themselves to their fans. I've always um, said that horror and science fiction fans support the genre really well, and I would say that that's also true for Peplum fans. They really seem to. There are no tepid Peplum fans. It seems like everybody's really rabid and knows their stuff too. They know the filmographies of these actors like the backs of their hands, and I like having a well-informed fan base. I think that's awesome. It's awesome for any genre. It really is.
I think it's awesome too, and I've been having some ideas about doing unique and interesting things with Peplum fandom, and those will be coming, if all goes well, within the next year or so.
Oh, okay, great. I may have some extra time post June 30th.
One of the things I tried to do before the pandemic is we had a theater in town. So I had approached them and talked to them about doing a sword and sandal cinema convention,
Oh, wow.
where I was at the time in the Elks Lodge. So they have space that you can rent to do events.
Hmm.
So I talked to them about it, and I also talked to the theater about showing sword and sandal films during that weekend.
Mm.
So we were in conversations, but then of course the pandemic came and reality changed. So the theater closed down, unfortunately, during the pandemic.
Oh no. Unfortunately, I think that's going to continue happening. Much as like what's happened with drive-ins. I think we're going to see a lot of brick and mortar theaters close. In fact, I've already noticed some of the bigger theater megaplexes in areas that are struggling. Losing population, I probably should say, are shutting down. I've seen that just probably twice in the last month alone.
Yes, I've been seeing it also. My wife and I still go to the theater once a month. We have our date night.
You know what? I haven't been to an indoor theater. Gosh, it's probably been 4 years. Been a long time. I would say 2019, definitely. Yeah.
They're like television now. They're commercials for television shows and all sorts of things that weren't in theaters not too long ago.
Well, unfortunately, most forms of entertainment are owned by one of 4 or 5 giant conglomerates. So it doesn't cost them a penny to advertise a television show that they're producing, before a movie begins at the theater. It's just not that, but I know what you mean. It's kind of off-putting.
And we have Nick Dyack on board, and he's the scholar about the new Peplum, which started with the film Gladiator,
Ah,
and continues to this day, not as forcefully as the Peplum of the past. And this Peplum seems to thrive in comic books, in computer and video games, and in other non-traditional places. But Peplum is back in one form or another.
well, and yeah, you might even argue that it never truly went away.
That's true.
You know, that's what happens. With every fad, it gets exploited for what it is, and then it falls by the wayside for a while. But that's not to say that it doesn't survive. It just morphs into something else.
the peplum sword and sandal cinema genre, it is also one of the few genres that can boast of having helped bodybuilding become a thing.
Most definitely. I think it influenced an entire generation of bodybuilders, and really brought it to, to popular American culture, to the point where some of the bodybuilders got to be pretty well known.
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s and 50s, 60s, and 70s, I should say.
And on some of our shows that deal with the Herculean physique, or the mythic physique as it was called before that, or the classical physique, they've all talked about how it was the sword and sandal cinema movies, starting with Steve Reeves and Hercules, that got them into bodybuilding in the first place.
Well, there again, though, as I was mentioning about Ed Fury, if you have just sort of, like I said, the perfect physical specimen, and this is particularly in the American psyche, I think. When we go to the theater, we like to see somebody we identify with.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps if that person is a hero, of sorts, and is doing fantastic deeds. And I think a lot of people see themselves, in these protagonists, as these protagonists, I guess I should say, in these films, or at least, this is what I would like to be. This is the ideal, and I want to be that. And certainly that's incredibly influential. And you didn't see, it's not that people, well, with the Hays Code, you didn't see much skin. Now that I think about it, that's a kind of an interesting thing. From the early 1930s, when a lot of films were pretty risque. If you ever watched any pre-code films at all?
Yes, in the past I have.
The adult, the subject matter is very adult, and it more or less has people jumping in and out of bed with one another, which is kind of surprising for the early 1930s. And then when the Hays Code comes in, they sanitized all that, and it instantly killed the genre, by the way. Yeah, that is one way you can kill a genre, is just to sort of erase any memory about it, which is a shame too, because those movies, they have a lot of Art Deco interiors and settings, and they're beautifully filmed, and to have just been erased, until the last 20 or so years is kind of shocking. But you didn't see a whole lot of pulchritude, male or female, in films between, let's say, 1934 and the late 50s, mid 50s anyway. If you think about it, I mean, everybody is dressed head to toe and then some, for the most part. You didn't see a whole lot of flesh in films, but with Hercules, when it came out in 58, 59 here in the US, I mean, wasn't wearing a whole lot. It was something new, though, and you got to see someone in top physical condition, standing in front of you, and you get to see all the definition, and you think, oh my God, I got to do something about this.
That's been true in art, though, too. In art, the mythological themes usually were nudes. And some people have speculated that the reason those the classical education remained for as long as it did was, for the longest time, you could only see nudes in classical art. And the classical art reflected what they were doing in antiquity in art.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, kids seeing these, like I said, perfect specimens, and these male archetypes, floating around on screen every Saturday at the Bijou. Gosh, I mean, it had to influence a lot of people, particularly at a time when kids were more than farm hands. pre-World War II, a lot of kids were just basically farmhands. They were there to do chores and sort of earn their keep. I don't think it applied to everybody, but I think it did apply to a
Lots of
large
kids.
number. Yeah, especially in more rural areas. But post World War II, you actually had leisure time. You weren't constantly trying to figure out how to put food on the table, as people had during the Great Depression and during World War II. And leisure time was a big, it suddenly became a thing that really hadn't been before, because you just more or less worked until you dropped, once upon a time. And having enough leisure time to work out to look like Steve Reeves must be, that would also be a sign of affluence, wouldn't it? Being able
Yes.
to have that, I mean, let's face it, that would take a lot of time. And the particular foods that you need to eat in order to maintain condition like that aren't necessarily inexpensive, because refined processed foods are cheap, but whole food is kind of pricey. And in the amount that you need to eat of it in order to maintain a muscularity like that.
And what you said also is true on another level in terms of people wanting to do good things. I've been announcing an Age of Heroes, new Age of Heroes. Wherever I go, I do something. And that started in a big way in New York. And when I was trying to explain it to people, I would ask them if they'd seen Jason and the Argonauts. So, so I would basically say that these things are informal attempts at accomplishing something that's socially, relevant. So in the Argo, the Voyage of the Argo, in the myth, you had the children of many gods who were in competition with each other, as well as royals and people with exceptional skills and people with nothing to go for them, really. But all together, they got together to get the Golden Fleece. And in symbolism, the Golden Fleece was rightful authority. It was restoration. It was rejuvenation, and it was healing. And it was something that brought good fortune to your community. So they all worked toward that. And I would explain that what I'm trying to do is something very similar. And people had seen Jason the Argonauts and they wanted to be Argonauts. So that was the way that people joined. So I just changed the word to Argonauts. So I recruit Argonauts now, and people have an idea of what that means. And some people want to be Argonauts, and let's do something impressive, and let's give it all we have, and whatever happens happens, but it'll be the adventure. So yeah, those films inspired people to do more, to be more, and to accomplish more.
And I'm not suggesting that every film has to have a morality that slaps you upside the head or anything, but a lot of those really do. I mean, there's a great sense of good versus evil, right versus wrong in those, and that's perfect for children, to absorb, to engage with. Something I should have mentioned too is one of the precursors for peplums are the Tarzan films, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of common themes there. He's the king of the jungle, and there is a certain mythos about that, in a sense, with Tarzan, and he was allowed to, run through the whole movie wearing very little, typically. But that's just something you didn't see in films until much, I should say, in films until like really the late 50s, early 1960s. If you discount, synchronized movies with synchronized swimming like Esther Williams and things like that. But you didn't see a whole lot of it. And with the Peplum films, I mean, everybody's on display, and oftentimes whoever was casting these films, whether it was somebody doing it on the fly really fast, or whether it was somebody who was putting in a lot of time, picked the prettier people oftentimes to be in these movies, and you see a lot of them repeatedly. A lot of the You know, the evil queen in one film will be the heroine in the next one. Gordon Mitchell once told me that you didn't dare try to date your leading lady because oftentimes she was the girlfriend of the producer or director, or maybe both. You know, who knows? But he said you said you looked, but you didn't touch because of that, because you wanted to keep working.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that as well.
I do not know that that's true, however. And I think if you look at the careers of some of the women who were in Peplum films, they had worked before Peplums, they worked after them. Like Helga Linnea would be a good one to take a look at, you know, for somebody who had a really lengthy career. Lisa Gastoni also had a long career. Silva Cascina, you know, gosh, she acted, you know, from the time she was a teenager up until the time she died. And they were beautiful women and very good actresses. And ultimately, you know, especially when it comes to a production that's got to be, you know, under budget, and that budget's not a big one, you need people who know their lines when they show up to work. They're ready to go. They know where their marks are. They don't waste a lot of production time, and time is money. So if you watch any old television shows from the 50s and 60s, the same people cycle through all of them. And I think it was partly because of the professionalism that, you know, got things produced quickly, you know, because time is money and sound stages are expensive to run.
That is very true. And I know from my TV show that I had and the movie that I made, that I learned the hard way that it's great to have really talented people, but it's better, infinitely better to have reliable people who will show up, who will do what they need
Yes.
to do, who know that the resources are limited and they'll respect that, and they deliver a good performance. I would favor them over like super talented people, even though again it would have been great to have them. But I learned that not everyone, but most had issues. They'd come late. They'd want to leave early. They didn't want to do things the way you wanted them to be done. So it was like, no, thank you after a while.
As I sometimes tell my students, 90% of life is showing up.
That's very true.
No, I'm serious. It is everything. Yes, it's at least 90%, maybe a little more. The other 10%, maybe you can fake it, but being there, number one, showing up is a good thing. Showing up means you intend to do something. Well, hopefully.
Not that I haven't run into ageism at this particular point in my life, because I'm obviously aged, but
I have run into enough of it already.
I have a reputation for showing up, for doing what they're paying me to do. Fortunately, a lot of it's creative and teaching, which I like doing. So there's that, but I show up, I'm there, and I'm not mysteriously not there. I don't deviate from whatever topic. I will deviate from it, but I will return to it, and they'll get something of value from what I'm teaching. So I think that consistency that isn't as much a part of working now as it was when we were growing up has served me well throughout my life.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, a good work ethic is so important when you're trying to get things done.
And Ed Fury must have had a great work ethic, as you said, he's had a long, remarkable career in a variety of genres.
Yeah, and he made a number of Peplum films in the early 60s. He, I would say, was probably best known as, Ursus in the Land of Fire and Ursus in the Valley of Lions. He's also Machiste in the film as well. And he didn't make a ton of Peplum films. I'm thinking that maybe 6, 7, something like that. But he made enough of them. in order to be, firmly ensconced in the genre. But if you look at his other works, through the years, even post Peplum, you can catch him in episodes of Cannon, Barnaby Jones, Police Story, the FBI. He, kind of hit a stride in the 70s where he appeared in a lot of television.
So he wasn't typecast, and that's good. A lot of folks from certain genres get typecast, and they're stuck there. Not as much now as in the past, but it's good that he didn't.
Well, if you think about it, it must have been kind of hard for him. I've heard other, very physically attractive, appealing actors say that it can actually hold them back.
Mm.
And if you never, unless you're A-list MGM star, your looks can, especially I guess if you're as good looking as somebody like Ed Fury would, Ed Fury was, even into old age, still very handsome. It probably could be a hindrance if you think about it, because being a character actor means you sort of have to dissolve into the role, into the character, and I think that might be hard for the audience to do because they just see, well, wait a minute, I remember you from Ursus in the Valley of Lions. Why are you a cop in Canada?
Not much need for taming lions in modern days.
Jeffrey Hunter was an actor who eventually kind of blamed his, good looks on his career kind of fading after a while, and everybody just thought of him as this, washed up, good-looking actor. I think Tab Hunter also ran into that as well. I do think that it can hold you back. I think it does for actresses, or it can for actresses as well. A number of the people profiled on my website, I dare say, might have been just a little too attractive. In a sense, where that it sort of took over their persona. In the films and in the television shows that they acted in.
Yeah, that must be a difficult place to be when
I would hate to be that handsome. Wouldn't it be terrible? People not hiring you because you look so good.
That would be an odd position to find oneself
It
in.
would, wouldn't it? Because usually you think, oh, maybe it was my face or something. But instead you're like, oh, I'm too hot to work here.
Well, I've had the experience of being too experienced. I remember before I left New York and moved to Pennsylvania, I was quite well known in my field, not for my entertainment, which I had the show, and I was wandering around New York with a sword strapped to my back and wearing fur and leather and all this type of stuff. So
you would have been popular on Times Square.
Oh, I was popular wherever I went, and I had also worked in the psychiatric rehabilitation workforce development field. So people wanted to see me, even professionally. When I went to meetings, they wanted to see me with a fur vest and the leather and stuff like that. And one place I work for, which I won't mention because they're a well-known agency, people ask them if they send me to meetings, can they send me with the whole Thor the Barbarian get up. So I had difficulty finding other opportunities because I was so well known, and they would come out and tell me, we'd love to hire you, but you're too well known. And also, that basically I was tied to things like wandering around New York with a sword strapped on my back that they didn't want associated with the marketing for their agency. So that was a very difficult position to find myself in. But it wasn't too good looking, though.
One of the first things that I remember ever seeing Ed Fury in was an episode of My Little Margie. When I was a teenager, we had an independent station that ran old, and I didn't know it at the time, but stuff that had already lapsed out of public domain. They ran old television shows in the mornings, old kinescopes from the early 1950s, stuff that was public domain. They didn't have to really pay for. It was cheap, to rent them. And one of the shows that they would run around 6:30 in the morning as I was getting ready for school was My Little Margie, and I watched it every morning, oddly enough, in the early 1980s. Ed Fury has a nice big role in one of the episodes, in one of the last episodes, actually. The show was only on for about 3 years. But his character in My Little Margie is Hercules, and he's a model in it. But it illustrates, my point about him. Maybe he was too attractive. But he certainly showed, even in when he was in Universal Films and in the mid 50s, and even in the early 50s, where he did a lot of small parts and cameos. He really stands out, just because he's got those chiseled features.
Yeah, I saw My Little Margie as a kid, but I guess I wasn't aware of Ed Fury, or I don't remember the episode. Is it on YouTube or someplace?
Oh, actually, it's on the Ed Fury page of Brian's Drive-In Theater.
Okay, now I know where to go.
Since it's public domain. And when I revamped the website last year, I wanted to develop three different potential entries, I should say, for each actor profile. One of them would be trailers, meaning the promotional 90-second to 2.5-minute promotional trailers that you would see before that week's film. Any television episodes that they were in that are now public domain, I will put an example of that up, and then one of their full-length features, one of their films. And on the Ed Fury page, Miss Whoses is the one that features Ed Fury.
Awesome.
It's the My Little Margie episode, and it's right there on the page. It's January 5th, 1955, as a matter of fact, is when it aired.
And you said he was Hercules in that, so it's a
well, his name is Hercules. We'll put it that way. So I think that's an interesting foreboding, what was to come just 2 or 3 years later.
Yes, that is an interesting foreboding. Who knows? Could have inspired him to pursue that path. We'll never know.
Yeah, that is one thing I don't know much about. And I don't really get into actors' personal lives very much. I kind of just stick to just the facts, but I don't know much about his personal life. I do know that at some point he was married to Dick Dubois' sister.
Ah.
And he was married to her for apparently a long time. I did, after his passing, hear from a visitor to my website who intimated that she was his granddaughter. And I'm not able to verify it, but she seemed to have some information about him that I hadn't heard anywhere else. It sounded legitimate to me, but like I said, without verification, I don't want to say a whole lot.
That is interesting. Would you want to interview her on the show? We can see if we can track her down, or
we can certainly do that. I am not. All you can do is ask. So
that is very true. The worst that can happen is they ignore you, or nothing's changed much in your life, and so. Later this year, there are 3 specials that I'm planning. One is the 25-year anniversary of Brian's Drive-In Theater.
Ooh, all right.
One is a Reg Park special, and the third one is a Steve Reeves special.
Oh, awesome.
So I would like to have your special next month if you're interested in doing that.
That would work out really well for me. As a matter
Fantastic.
April would be great.
And then you're involved in both other specials too. And then I have a fourth one, but I'm not sure if I can pull it off this year or it'll wait till early next year. But those show I'm doing, you're of course part of all of them. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, well, so am I now. It gives me something to think about and plan for.
And I too don't know very much about actors' private lives either, but it's sometimes very discouraging not to be able to find anything. Like
It
with,
it is, but I have to say that I don't put my life out there either, for anybody.
good point.
Um, no, I don't. If you look at my social media channels, there's nothing there personal. The very precious little, it's personal. There's probably a little bit here and there, but I just, your private life's your private life, and I certainly understand when an actor doesn't want everybody in the middle of their business, because I certainly don't. And to tell you the truth, now it seems so refreshing because these celebrities today, you know too much about them. I don't know if you probably didn't watch the Academy Awards on Sunday.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay. I did actually saw, well, I had to go to bed in the middle of it, but I actually saw quite a bit of it. And the instant somebody would get an award, all of this crap would hit social media about, well, this person didn't deserve the award, that person did. I'm like, oh, come on, nobody deserves these awards. but let the person who won the award have 15 minutes before you start tearing them down. I really don't appreciate stuff like that. You know what I mean? Second guessing things like that. It's like, come on. I mean, no part of life is fair, and certainly not winning an award. That's never fair. And it's so subjective that you just have to roll with whomever
Uh,
is picked, right? You know what I mean? It's
right,
not
I know exactly what you mean. And people,
not an empirical competition where somebody gets 2 more points than somebody else.
and people seem to delight in tearing apart movies and tearing apart celebrities and tearing apart
Yeah.
studios. I made one movie, and I can tell you that movie, even though it's a fringe, ultra low budget movie, was really hard to make. And it took a very long time and many days of sleepless hours and so forth.
The less money you have, the harder it is to make.
But I appreciate other people making films because I know how difficult it is, and you can't read the minds of your viewers. So you try to do something that, is important to you or pleasing to you.
Right.
So I hear people tearing apart like these big budget productions and tearing apart the studios. It's like, don't they realize how much work goes into these things? Even again, something ultra low budget. So I've learned not to criticize, the work of others, especially if it's at a level that I myself have never attained.
That's a good way to approach it too. It might not be your cup of tea, but that doesn't mean it's a complete piece of shit, right?
Right, very true. Right.
It might be, but and I don't know about you, but I have actually, and this has happened to me a number of times. My first viewing of a film, I'll hate it. I'll toss out a classic for you. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Uh-huh.
When it came out in the late 80s, I could not have cared less. I watched the first few minutes of it, probably rented it. Yeah, probably rented the VHS tape or something like that, and hated it. Just hated it. And back, oh gosh, I don't know how long ago it's been. I'd say 25 years ago or so. There's a ride at Disneyland in Anaheim called Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, and we rode it. Then I watched the movie again and loved it. So maybe I just, maybe I just wasn't in the mood
Uh-huh.
for the movie at the time, but I think it's brilliant now. I don't know why. I have no idea why I hated it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But it just didn't speak to me at the time that I was trying to watch it the very first time.
With me, that happened with Conan the Barbarian. I'm a very big Conan
Really?
fan, and I've been a Conan fan since I was maybe 10 or 11. So I was a longtime Conan fan. And when they came out with the movie, on first watching, I didn't like it because they took the story of Conan as set down by his creator, Robert E. Howard, and other people who wrote about Conan, and they changed all these like details that didn't make any sense to me. Plus, they put Easter eggs in it, which were covers from the magazine, The Savage Sword of Conan. And so it was all, if you knew that they were there, you couldn't miss them. If you didn't know what they were there, I guess it wouldn't matter. But I was very annoyed that they took the story and they changed it. But then after the third viewing, I began to realize that, okay, maybe it's not Conan, as I determine Conan to be in my mind, but it's a good film on its own. And, it's another version of Conan. And then I started to appreciate it for its own merits, and I came to love the film. So I experienced that type of conversion too.
Like I said, sometimes you have to be in the mood for a certain movie. And, sometimes a movie just doesn't grab you initially. And I try to give any film like the first 10 minutes. And if I'm not buying into it, if I haven't latched on to a character that I like or hate, or, has provoked some sort of emotional response in me, I usually do just turn it off.
Athena and I do that too.
But you also have to be in the mood to, I guess, accept entertainment as well. And I'm not always in the mood to watch something. Especially if I have other responsibility, if I have other things that have to be done, I've got to get those done before I can sit down and take in some entertainment.
Yeah, I can't watch entertainment and do nothing else. I think we talked about this before.
I'm sort of one and the same. I do tend to wander about whenever I'm cleaning house or something like that. I'll have a movie on, and you hear all of it, but you only see
a little bit of it. Yeah.
bits and pieces of it.
Unfortunately, now rewinding is easy, or I could ask Athena, what just happened?
It pays to have somebody actually watching it so that they can catch you up.
Yes.
It's better than having a DVR, if you ask me.
But I do the same. Usually I work out before bed. So I'll be working out, or I'll be catching up on correspondence because I'm behind again, and doing something, and the TV will play. I'll hear everything. But every now and then some sounds will come from the direction of the TV, and my mind can't put together what happened based on what my brain was creating from listening to whatever was playing. Then Athena usually fills me in a couple of sentences, and I'll still watch while I do something else, but facing the TV.
Well, whenever I'm walking on the treadmill, and I do it, at least 6 days a week now.
Awesome.
I take that 35-40 minute time, and I usually do watch something. It might be a movie if I'm if I found something on YouTube that I really want to see, or otherwise it'll be maybe an old television program. I've been watching old episodes of The French Chef with Julia Child, the old black and white 1960s old early videotape versions. And I just love them. They're wonderful. She's been fun. I used to watch her when I was a kid on PBS, but I never got to see the old early episodes of hers. And they're done in one take, which I find just fascinating. There's no edit in it at all. It's
right.
They turn on the camera, and it's her, and she's preparing a meal and talking the entire time, which had to have been nerve-wracking and difficult to do. How do you prepare a meal in 30 minutes and then make sense out of everything that you're trying to say? I can't do that during a podcast.
I used to like doing that on the TV show. We take several takes, and sometimes something somebody does would be so awesome that we had to recut everything to give a slightly different meaning. Yeah, I like alternate takes.
But it kind of, I like being able to kill two birds with one stone. You're exercising plus.
Uh-huh.
I've been surprised how many tips I've picked up, from watching her old, black and white PBS shows from the '60s, stuff that I've actually employed in my own cooking, and that actually really does work. So it could be educated. Well, it was public broadcasting. It was educational, back then. I'm not sure that does any educational programming still exist at all anywhere?
I'd imagine so, but I wouldn't know where
See
to.
stuff on YouTube, but yeah, I'm not sure that public broadcasting is anymore.
There was public broadcasting here in Jersey, and I know that because they had me on a show called Jobcast, and then it became a repeat guest on that, and then they wanted to make a spin-off show with me. So they were the public television of New Jersey, NJN. So they're no longer there, but that was public television. And there were studios that had like UHF programming. Last time I was in New York, I tried to find some of the old studios I dealt with, and they weren't there anymore either. And they've been gone long enough where people didn't even remember them being there at all.
Oh.
Now there are still some public access stations. There's a public access station a few towns over, and they're one of the stations I've tried interesting in some of my projects. And they were interested in 5 of them, and we were in discussions, but then COVID happened. So that kind of fizzled out and died as well. I imagine there must be somewhere, but in my range of places I've interacted with, no.
One of my first jobs was in public television, believe it or not.
I believe it.
Yeah. It was interesting too. It certainly told me that I didn't want to work in public broadcasting. Or I didn't want to work in television either, for that. But it was fun. I didn't pay much, as I recall, but it was interesting. It was fun to do.
Well, public television gave freedom to do things you normally wouldn't do on regular television. I know when I was on the UHF channel, and it was being rebroadcast on some of the public access channels in various boroughs, and further afield at one point. I started doing stuff with the other television hosts. Like I decided one time that I was going to conquer public television. So a friend of mine made a flag. So I'd enter into other people's shows. They knew that I would do this very ahead of time, and I'd plant my flag there and claim the show as my own. And then I would, subsequently, I would introduce the show and introduce the host of the show. And we had fun with that for months. And I had a map or showing which shows I still needed to conquer, and so forth. So I can't see doing that really on a network or on a cable station, a regular cable station.
No, I don't think you would be able to do that.
No. And also in those things, if you're an expert on a bunch of things, and last time I made a list of things I can talk about off the top of my head, it was like 50 things. So if anybody needed a guest to talk about a specific thing, I'd get calls and I'd go in and be on their show. So that, again, you couldn't do. Like one day I'm talking about psychological things, the next day I'm talking about paranormal things, the day after that I'm talking about like movies. So again, a bizarreness and a dissonance, within the station. But it was very fun, and again, not something you could probably do on regular television.
No, and you and I have talked about the paranormal as well.
Yes. And where I'm going very soon, I'm giving a bunch of talks, and one of them will be at Disclosure Network, New York, on the Hercules and the Space Gods part of the programming and things that I do. And now there's enough of it there where I could tie it together. and actually unify it and create something very distinct from what we've been doing so far. So because you're covering science fiction also, and because science fiction is part of what I'll be doing differently, in a telephone conversation very soon, I'll tell you about that and see if you want to play with that as well.
Okay. Okay. And speaking of science fiction, we have another meeting on Thursday.
Yes, we do. Do you know what you'll be covering on Thursday?
I do not right now, but I will let you know as soon as I know.
I'm sure by Thursday you will know. And
Well, to tell you the truth, I had a couple of ideas kicking around, and I'm trying to figure out which one would make the better show.
okay, I look forward to learning what you decide.
All right, very good.
Now we're approaching the 10 o'clock mark. I don't have anywhere to go. If you want to continue a little bit, or if you want to end it here, we could do that.
I'm kind of running out of steam
Okay.
today. I'm kind of a little tired today, so if we can go ahead and wrap things up.
Okay, we will wrap things up. And before we do, I will let you know that all our hosts of Sword and Sandal cinema shows will be part of your tribute.
Oh, wonderful! I'm really looking forward to next month. It'll be a lot of fun.
And thank you very much. How can people contact you? Where can they find you? Where can they become part of your journey?
Well, take a look at the drive-in at www.briansdrive-in-theater.com. I've profiled more than 300 actors and actresses from B movies, and a lot of your favorite Peplum stars are also profiled at the Drive-In Theater website. Interact with me on Facebook. All you have to do is log into Facebook and then type in Brian's Drive-In Theater. I should pop up pretty readily there. I'm on Twitter as well, but I just lurk on Twitter, so I don't really tweet anymore and haven't for quite some time. Facebook is my primary social media outlet for now, although that might be changing in the near future.
Thank you very much. And I will lay a blessing upon you. Although you're a good-looking fellow, may it not destroy your life.
Or screw me out of a job.
And thank you to our wonderful audience. And this will be on YouTube tomorrow. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Hercules.